Hello, welcome back to the Cricket Draft Show, where we are getting close towards the end of the Big Bash. We're nearly in the eliminators, the knockouts, the finals, whatever you want to call it. But we've got one game left in game week 8. We've got one normal game week left, and then we're into that game week 10 madness. My name is Dan Jadzevics. I'm your host. I'm joined by our analyst, Dan Weston, our game expert, Chris Dixon. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. Drop us a like on the video as well. But yeah, we're nearly at the end of game week 8. Chaps, it's been a good week for all of us. Chris, you've flown up the table to 168th. Dan, you've flown up the table to 197th. And I'm up the table to 528th. So we're doing well. But how are your teams going? Dan, we'll start with you. How are you getting on?
Yeah, pretty happy with this week after a couple of mediocre weeks. 879 points so far, on the cusp of the top 100 for the game week. And I think with some nice scope to boost that tomorrow, which I think we're gonna talk about a little bit in a very bizarre scenario that I find myself in, where I don't want my captain to play tomorrow. But pretty happy with the week. If we can get 1,000 plus for the week, which looks pretty reasonable to push for, I'll be pretty happy.
And that 1,000, that's above your model?
Yeah, I was looking at about 850 to 900 per game week before the tournament started. So it'll be my best performance overall for the week, anything over 1,000.
Love to see it. How about you, Chris? How's your team going?
Yeah, pretty good week. Very similar to Dan in terms of points scored. Got 877 so far. I bought in Chris Green, and that turned out to go well. Got 260 points from him. And the two of my other all-rounders, Bar Cooper Connolly and Jamie Overton, have both got over 100 points, so that's gone quite well. Chris Jordan was my other all-rounder who didn't play. I also have him with Dan. I kind of hope he does play tomorrow. Although I do have Matt Wade as my vice captain, so he's got a few points there if he doesn't play. But I know Dan Lesson's going to reveal why he wants Chris Jordan not to play tomorrow, so which is another reason why I do want to play. But overall a decent week so far with one game to go.
Love it. I thought I was playing a blinder this week, lads, to be honest with you. I've got 846 points. I'm 129th in the game. And then I looked at your two teams and realized I was still behind you. Whatever I do, I cannot outscore either of you, and it's really starting to wind me up. But I've got 4 players left to have potential games in that final game tomorrow between the Brisbane Heat and the Hobart Hurricanes. But yes, all right then. Before we start talking about other individual players, my captain of Mitch Owen has paid off again so far. That's twice I've backed him now, and that's kind of paid dividends, which is nice. It's a difference maker. Dan, tell us why you don't want Chris Jordan to play tomorrow. Chris, then you tell us why you do want Chris Jordan to play tomorrow, and then I'll tell you why I don't want Chris Jordan to play tomorrow.
Okay, well, I'll go for the basic reason, and that is because he didn't play the first game in the game week, and obviously Hobart have got 2 games in this game week, so they've got the last game in tomorrow of the game week. But if he doesn't play, Matt Wade switches to captain and gets 67 extra points, plus whatever he gets tomorrow. And then I also get 123 on top for Spores coming in for Chris Jordan as a like-for-like as well. So I'm plus 190 if Jordan doesn't play tomorrow, and then lose whatever Jordan would have got tomorrow on average. So maybe like 50 in terms of the model points. So I'm plus 140 basically if Jordan doesn't play. There's differentials factors as well, which I'll leave to Chris now maybe to move on and chat about a bit as well.
Chris, why do you want Chris Jordan to play?
Oh, because Dan wants him not to play. It's the opposite there. I don't want him to gain. Just looking at the net benefit loss really there. I mean, I'm not going for the overall. We're both out of the top 100. It's not like we're going to win overall, so it's getting competitive between the two of us there. So don't want him to play, but also I don't have the luxury of having someone on the bench that's going to come in and add 100 points there like Dan does. So kind of hoping he does play.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm quite surprised actually, Chris, with the way that you've set your team up. And I'm sure it's coincidental, but the way you spoke about making sure that bench is kind of good and healthy and providing you options, it doesn't feel like it's something you've managed to kind of stumble across just yet in the Big Bash. I mean, there's still another game week to go. Maybe, I'm not sure. It's coincidence. I'm sure there's a bit of bad luck involved. I'm in the camp where I'd rather Chris Jordan doesn't play because I've already got Cooper Connolly on the bench with 137 points as an all-rounder. So I'd be thrilled to bits to just swap them straight away. I've still got Tim David to go again, who I probably could have done with a little bit more time in the middle in that first game. I think he finished about 24 not out. And desperately watching and hoping that Matt Wade like nicked off early doors and Tim David went out there and scored another 60. I've got Max Bryant tomorrow. Could have a little bit of a madness for the Heat, and then I've got my captain, my Mitch Owen captain, that has already got 308 points this week. So a similar kind of performance tomorrow could see a huge kind of swing up the point scorers. And I mean, you never know. I might sneak into the top 100 for the game week. But yeah, what has gone wrong with the bench, Chris?
I'd actually say this week I've actually had the strongest bench I've had, in terms of I've had apart from Chris Jordan. If Chris Jordan does play in the last game, I will have 14 of my 15 actually playing, but I just don't have my bowler slot this week doesn't have a game with Peter Siddle. So that's just purely the way it works. I put Jordan on the right hand side of my all rounders because I thought he was the most likely out of those to play. So I knew Kirk Connolly and Overton maybe the least likely to play. It's probably Overton's last game. He's going off to join England. So I purely put Jordan on the other side, thinking that he was the banker, so I wouldn't then suffer from him not playing. Which is another reason why I do want him to play. But in terms of actual bench, 3 of my 4 on the bench were played this week, which hasn't really been the case throughout the tournament so far. So apart from the fact I don't have a bowler, I've actually starting to get nearer a settled side overall. So it just hasn't worked out with Chris Jordan really.
Fingers crossed it sorts itself out for game week 10. I've kind of felt a little bit similar to the double game weeks for myself personally. I don't know how you two have felt about them, but I've kind of felt they've been a bit more of a curse actually than a blessing for me this season in the Big Bash. I had the debacle with the Melbourne Stars double captain, I think in game week 3 it was, with Marcus Stoinis and Tom Curran, which was an absolute bust. My 12th player Googly as well, that I used up a couple of weeks ago, where none of my bench existed, and I had kind of 3 players that had started pretty much every game in the build up to that moment that I used it, and they didn't play. And then obviously Chris Jordan missing the first of these 2 games for this game week, which then potentially has a knock-on effect, as a negative effect for the Cooper Connolly coming in, or for Dan, for yourself with your situation. There must be some teams out there that have nailed it, but it's felt like a real struggle.
Yeah, for me with the double game week has been a bit of a mixed bag. I think I had a really good one earlier in the comp, but then since then I've kind of struggled a bit. Poor performance from Matt Wade and Nathan Ellis tomorrow would mean that I haven't taken advantage of this game week, even with a decent week. So yeah, it's certainly a mixed bag. Ultimately for me though, I'm always looking at expected points outcomes and kind of the maths behind it a little bit. So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and you've got to be at peace with that.
Yeah, just the way the game falls, I suppose. Let's have a look at this table then, chaps. The one that you two are getting quite excited about with a couple of game weeks to go. Chris, you're currently in first place, 5,740 points as a total. Dan, you are in second with 5,668. So there's a 72-point differential between first and second place in this league of 3, which, as if you were paying attention, what we spoke earlier about, could be evaporated depending on the availability of Chris Jordan tomorrow, and we could have a new leader going into game week 9. I think my race has probably been run. I'm on 4,871 points, and I'm 869 points off the lead. So I mean, maybe if Mitch Owen scores a double 100 tomorrow, there's a chance that, and takes 5 then I could kind of sneak my way back up into a bit of contention, but I still think I'd probably be behind the 2 of you anyway. But yeah, I must admit, it must make these last 2 game weeks pretty interesting for the pair of you.
No, for sure, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to come top of our little mini league, but yeah, we've got some plenty of time to come still.
Any plans, Chris?
It's very tight. Nothing, no specific plans. Just kind of see how the last, I don't know too far ahead, see how the last last game of this game week goes, and then I'll assess my options going forward.
Yeah, okay. So as you said, we've got 1 game left in game week 8, which is the Brisbane Heat versus the Hobart Hurricanes tomorrow morning. Before we have a look at game week 9, we obviously will talk about who would be specifically to be dropped from the teams, which players, which names that you could be considering or looking at to bring in, maybe with one eye on the eliminators and the knockouts in game week 10. But there's 1 regular game week left where each of the 8 teams all play 1 game. So there's nothing particularly fancy to think about or worry about. We have 3 teams that have already qualified for the knockouts in the Hobart Hurricanes, the Sydney Thunder and the Sydney Sixers. So we kind of know that they could be a safe bet, or they would be a safe bet to start looking at those players, bringing in extra players if you needed to. or are there any kind of last minute kind of diamonds? Is there like a Melbourne Renegades player that isn't going to make the knockouts, but is going to make a difference in game week 10 that you could cash in on, Chris? Well, let's start with the game expert first. Firstly, I guess, have you got one eye on the knockouts and the eliminators now? And have you also got any names in mind that you're thinking about kicking out of your team or players that you're bringing in?
Yes, starting to now look one eye with a slightly more settled squad, and I want to avoid bringing someone in that's then going to be knocked out, because then you're wasting a transfer. Bring them in and bring them out when you can then use that elsewhere. But then we're also in the position where there's no teams that are out of it at this stage. The table is quite, you've got the 3 teams that have gone through, but then the rest is quite congested. You've got the Heat, who've got the worst net run rate, but they're in 5th with 2 games in hand, on an odd number of points, where the other team is vying for it on an even number of points. So the Heat could technically actually need to win 2 of their games, even though they're in 5th position. It's quite hard to actually see who's going to get that 4th slot at this stage. So after tomorrow, there may be a slightly better clue. But it's quite hard to see at this stage who I'm going to take out. The safe bet is to bring in the 3 teams that have gone through, and to bring in, max out your 3 players at this stage, to try and minimise the moving around and shuffling you're going to have to do after the next game week. So that's probably the wiser strategy. But if you want to take a risk and take a punt on one of the other teams that's going to go through, if you're in a position maybe like yourself to take a punt and stack up on, Renegades are in last place and say they're going to get through and no one else is thinking that, then that might be a wise strategy to do if you're looking to make big gains.
How about yourself, Dan? Who's on the chopping block?
Oh, this is a good question. So I obviously agree with everything that Chris says. Sixers, Hurricanes, and Thunder guaranteed through. But I've already got 7 players from those 3 teams, so I'm pretty close to maxing out my quota from those. We're going to know a lot more tomorrow, because if Heat win tomorrow against Hurricanes, then Strikers, Scorchers, and Renegades all get knocked out. So actually, then that would really give us some clarity as to the teams that we're going to look to identify to recruit players from. Then it's between Stars and Heat for that last 4th spot. So yeah, let's see about that. There's a couple of players I think moving over to England duty sooner rather than later as well. So a bit of an eye on that. I've personally got 2.3 million unspent at the moment, so I could potentially upgrade my bench, maybe use 12th man Googly, and I think also for this game week in isolation, a good bench could be pretty useful, because if some of the qualified teams like Hobart Hurricanes might do with Chris Jordan tomorrow, rest some players in advance of the knockout stages, then there might be a few rogue selections in this last game week, and might want a bench of decent strength to come in and replace players that unexpectedly don't play.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we spoke that Jamie Overton will be heading off at the end of this game week. So I think for me, he's going to be one of the players that will be going. And I think of all of them, I think the Strikers are one of the less likely to qualify from the other 5, maybe said kind of quietly with not much confidence, because you never really know. And then I agree with you, it does really depend as to what happens tomorrow, because Max Bryant could be an option to move on. I've got Sam Constas on the bench, which is an easy swap for him. I've got Cooper Connolly, which is an easy swap for Jamie Overton. The other player that I think I'll definitely be able to get rid of now is the 4 million Mitch Perry, and actually bringing another Sydney Sixer that might actually get on the cricket field. Someone like Jaffa Chauhan, for example. He actually turned up and played a game today. Who'd have thought it? But there we go. We are, well, as I say, at the end of game week 8. We've got 1 game left to go. We're looking ahead to game week 9. Then it's the knockouts. So good luck, chaps. Good luck to the viewers. Good luck to all of you that are building your teams up for game week 9 and for those knockouts. Let us know what transfers you're making. Let us know where you are in the league, in the world. And also let us know who your player of the tournament has been so far. And we will see you at the end of game week 9 as we look ahead to the knockouts.